Hey everyone, happy March. Welcome to More Layers. I'm Seth Moriano.
And I'm Jordan Smith. And on a lot of times on this show, Seth and I have talked about movies. We both love watching movies, TV shows, but a lot of the time we've talked about films that have come out more recently or films that have been released in the modern era, as it's been referred to. Well, we figured this time we'd take it back a ways and talk about the movies and shows that played a big part in our childhood.
Yeah, and I've got a long list of them I think I can really delve into.
Oh yeah, I definitely had a lot that I wrote down. I tried to condense it a little bit into categories and such, and maybe if there's too many, we can save a few for a part two of this particular topic. But yeah, I also have a decent sized list.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So, what do you got?
well, the first thing I wrote down, I figured was pretty generic because there's just a lot of them. And I just said just a bunch of Disney and Pixar movies. I was one of those kids that grew up on these things, especially when they were on VHS tapes. Hopefully, our audience knows what that is. But yeah, there are definitely a few that my family would watch a lot. There was Beauty and the Beast. There was Aladdin. Little Mermaid came in every once in a while. What we didn't really watch The Lion King too much growing up. Now that I think about it, but yeah, we definitely had a lot of the Disney movies from the 90s and early 2000s growing up. So I would definitely say they played a big part of my childhood and quite frankly are probably a part of the reason why I enjoy musical theater so much.
Oh yeah, yeah. And you've done like most of those Disney stories on stage by now, and myself a couple or so. So
Yeah, on stage I've done Beauty and the Beast. I've done Lion King, Peter Pan, Mary Poppins, some of them multiple times now. Making sure I'm not missing any. Oh, we did do Little Mermaid not too long ago. That was back in 2018, so it's a little longer than I remember. But yeah, we've definitely done a handful of them on stage, and because I grew up with some of them, being able to become part of the story really just allowed me to relive part of my young life because I love these stories so much.
yeah, yeah, I get that. Yeah.
And I definitely could go on and on about some of them, but I'll move on for now. Um, Not quite done with Disney projects yet because there were two Disney TV shows that I grew up with and even still kind of come back to every once in a while. The first being Darkwing Duck. For those that don't know this character, think Batman, but he's a duck and a little bit more narcissistic. That's kind of what he is. He has the same vibe. He comes out at night, fights crime. He does it a little bit more for the glory than Batman ever would. But he makes it fun. There's a lot of zany characters that are very memorable. I love some of the villains in there. In fact, I can't think of any that I don't. But it was definitely one that my brother and I bonded over because we had some VHS tapes with a few of the episodes on them. I don't know if I ever saw Darkwing Duck at a Disney park, though. I think my brother did. But yeah, Darkwing Duck is one of the shows that my brother and I bonded over, and I love coming back to every once in a while.
Mm,
And the theme song they have is so catchy.
yeah, yeah. My brother and myself, we bonded a few times over like watching, like we used to stay up late, like watching Seinfeld or The Tonight Show or Saturday Night Live. So not quite the same, but I don't know. I don't know. It was more kind of his jam than it ever was mine. But yeah, it was pretty good still.
I mean, hey, it was a way to bond with your brother, and I can certainly relate.
Yeah.
But that was the show that I would bond over with my brother a bit. The one that I bonded with my sister over quite a lot, in fact, we still quote it to this day, is Kim Possible. And I'm talking about the cartoon show, not the weird live action movie that came out in recent years, but specifically the TV show that was 2D animated. This is probably the show I've watched all the way through more times than any other. I know my sister and I watched it all the way through at least twice, and I'm pretty sure I've seen it once or twice on my own time. But it's just such a good show. Again, catchy theme song, and all the characters that they had implemented, particularly the main ones, I feel like were really well done. There wasn't any that felt like they were getting less screen time than others. And I find this show amusing in the fact that a lot of the funniest moments come from the villains. It's like anytime the villains are on screen, they pretty much steal the show in one way or another, especially two or three of the main ones. And there are times when they team up that's really cool. But there's just so many funny moments, a lot of great stories in there. And as I kind of preluded to with my sister, it's very quotable, especially when you've seen it multiple times.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool to see how, even though we're probably not the youngest generation alive anymore, a whole nother has come since then, and the show was pretty much kind of a product of our own.
Mhm.
How it's still, even the younger kids are connecting with it. Like I have a sister who's like, I think it's tech, called Gen Z. She was born in early 2000s. I was born early 90s, but she's into it now, and it's and I don't know if I've shared this story on this show ever before, but there was the one time I'm I contacted the podcast business of Christy Carlson Romano, who did the voice for the titular role. And because she had done Beauty and the Beast on Broadway, she was specifically Belle. And I said, hey, we've got this production of Beauty and the Beast coming up. You and your family want to come? I never heard back, but then sometime later, I saw a story on her Instagram about a new project she had coming out. I kind of replied, yeah, I'm excited about that, and she liked that, so
Oh,
there's something.
yeah, absolutely. Any sort of reply from someone of that status or someone that you've looked up to can be a big deal. And in a not too similar vein, but I will say that my sister and I bonded over the show so much that she got me a nice video message from I, I can't remember his name offhand, but it was the guy who voiced Ron Stoppable.
Will Friedle, yeah.
Yes. And he was in character part of the time, which was really cool. He sang the happy birthday song as Ron Stoppable. And it just seems like these people have so much fun with their roles. They really do. Excuse me. But it was a fun show. It was one of the few Saturday morning cartoons that my family had access to because we didn't have a cable and such. So
But you had
our
like the big three, like ABC, CBS, NBC.
yep, we did have those. And ABC Kids, I believe it was
Yeah.
called, had shows like Kim Possible, Emperor's New School, and so on and so forth. But Kim Possible was definitely the one that we tuned in for the most.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Then moving on from Disney, uh, there were actually some movies and shows that I watched growing up that were at least based on video games, which is kind of interesting because especially video game films don't have the greatest reputation, but there are some that stood out, and there were some that I grew up with. One of them was definitely Pokemon. like with Darkwing Duck or some of the other Disney films, had a few of the episodes of that on VHS. And there were just so many moments near the beginning of the series where Ash or one of the other characters was being really ridiculous in all the best ways. And that was something else that my siblings and I would reference or quote all the time. Still kind of do every once in a while. But it was one of those shows that I felt I could really get into. Even in the opening episodes, you would think it was going to be all zany all the time, but it got some serious moments in there real quick. Like there were a bunch of birds that were attacking Ash's Pikachu, and he was standing in front of him with his arms open, being like, I won't let you hurt him. Come and get me. And it had this dramatic music in the middle of a rainstorm of all things. It's like, this is a children's show, and they tackle some serious issues. Even in the future, much further down the line, they have other serious issues in there. Like one of the characters they'd run into, their Pokemon companion is like all old aged. He's barely able to move anymore. And then by the end of that episode, it's implied that it passed away. It's like, this is not something you'd normally see, but they pull it off every once in a while. But it's a fun show. I'm far behind on it now with how many episodes there are now and some of the movies. But I love a lot of the battle sequences, the visuals that come with it, and some of the serious and dramatic story elements. It has a lot that I'm looking for in a good cartoon show. And I know some people will have, I guess, for the lack of a better word, divisive feelings of Pokemon, and in some ways it's understandable. But I personally am okay with it. I've had a lot of fun with it. Maybe I'll try to catch up on the episodes at some point if I find a way to do so. Now, Pokemon was not the only one, and surprise, surprise, a lot of the remaining video game ones that I watched as a kid were based on what else? Sonic the Hedgehog. By the time I was at an age where I could watch shows or movies and really grasp what was happening, there were at least, I think, 3 different Sonic cartoons that were out at that point. Like Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic Underground, Sonic Sat AM, as it was called, and then the anime Sonic X. I've watched through all of them at least once, and there were definitely ones that I liked more than others, but just watching him run around at high speeds and some of the cool battles that he or other characters would get into, especially in some of the more recent shows, was just a lot of fun. Introduced some of my favorite characters ever. And I think especially some elements of these shows have been implemented into the recent films. So seeing something that I grew up with being translated into something that I see now and still love, it's very reminiscent of parts of my childhood that I love to look back on.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were just a bunch of us, well, not including Jordan, but a bunch of us were having a little game night last night, and one of the games we played was Heads Up, and one of the answers was Hedgehog, and of course, as you might guess, first thing that came to my mind was Sonic, but even though it wasn't my team's turn, otherwise I would have said it, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I instantly would have done the same thing. I would have thought of Sonic himself. I mean, really, even though he doesn't look like the traditional hedgehog, it's hard to hear the word hedgehog without thinking of the character. That's how synonymous he's really gotten with the creature.
Yeah, sure.
But moving on from the video game stuff, Disney is not the only animation studio that has made some projects that I grew up with as a kid. DreamWorks also had a small handful in there. And the first one that came to my mind was Prince of Egypt. It is a very interesting case because I think it's one of the few movies that is based on a story from the Bible that even people who don't necessarily believe in God or those stories can still watch and enjoy. I've talked to non-Christians who still love this movie. And I think a lot of that has to do with just how well the story is told and the impressive visuals for the time. This came out, I believe, in the early 2000s, and the animation at the time looked absolutely amazing. Still holds up really well now. And the music just made everything seem much more grand, more dramatic, and when it needed to be, much more serious. Like they didn't pull too many punches when it came to the darker elements of the story of Moses, particularly as he's growing up. Granted, they don't say outright a lot of the time what those darker elements are, but there's implications in there. There's even images and hieroglyphics, excuse me, that really illustrate what happened with a lot of these people. And the fact that it's based on a true story and they were able to tell it in such a way that even kids could follow along is really impressive. I
Yeah,
still watch it.
that is impressive then.
Yeah, for sure. And then what's really amusing, kind of segueing into my next one, is that there was another movie that they were working on at the exact same time. And there's a little fun story that comes along with this, and that is the first Shrek movie. This was, I think these were the first two projects that DreamWorks really had to get their name in the spotlight. And apparently, while working on these two films simultaneously, those who were working on Prince of Egypt that weren't exactly staying in line, as it were sent over to work on the first Shrek movie as a form of punishment, as it were. And it was often referred to as getting Shreked.
Yeah, that reminds me of like, well, like there's a story in a I just read comedian John Crist's book, and he said like public school, he said, was used as a threat against us. Like our dad would say, "Don't you make me send you to public school."
Yeah, I never went to a public school myself, but I can definitely tell you that I'm glad I didn't because a lot of the stories I've heard from those places, not very pleasant.
Hmm.
So if he was saying he would send you there, I could definitely believe that to be a legitimate disciplinary action.
Yeah.
Yeah, Prince of Egypt and Shrek 1, I grew up with very much so. And then one that stayed with me even more, and I still rewatch even more often than the first movie, is the second Shrek film, which many people that I've talked to have said it's the best one in the Shrek lineup so far. We'll see how Shrek 5 does, but out of the four Shrek movies, not including the Puss in Boots films that have come out so far, so many people love the second one, so much so that uh, when it came out, I think it was last year for its 20th anniversary, a bunch of us went together and saw it in theaters, and it was a blast.
Oh yeah, it was so good. Yeah, it tremendously holds up. Solid sequel, one of the best that I've ever seen.
Absolutely. And when we were first walking in, there were two girls, I think around our age, that were going in, and we found out that they had never seen this movie before. But we made sure to let them know that out of all the Shrek movies they could have seen in theaters, this was the best one to see. So they made a good choice.
Yeah.
But just So many jokes in there were great. Uh, I Needed a Hero, their version of it is probably one of the best adaptations of that song I've ever seen. Just seeing a giant gingerbread cookie invading the kingdom of Far, Far Away was really funny. And I love how they took the risk of having Shrek not look like how he normally does for about half the movie. It's like, yeah, we know that he looks like this, but seeing him look the other way for a long time, and then at the end, willing to give up his ogre life for the one he's married to, just showed how much he had changed from the first movie to then, and how much he really cared for Fiona, willing to give up what he loved for what she wanted. That's something that the first two Shrek movies did really well, is that they had these beautiful messages for their audience that as a kid I'm like, okay, this is like, even as a young kid I was thinking this is a nice twist on the way stories are told, and these are really important messages that even now still need to be spread around. But now I have two more categories, as it were. Uh, this next one kind of sums up some of the shows that I would consistently watch after I got home from school, or at least some time after I got home, and would often watch with the rest of my family, or at least my mom, maybe my sister. And the first one was Arthur. Because I didn't have cable, a lot of the shows that I watched came from PBS Kids. And Arthur was arguably the most consistent one I would tune in for. I would usually get out of school around 2:30, 3 o'clock. Arthur would come on around 4. So I would have enough time to get home, settle in, and have that be one of the first things I did. And my family and I love to watch it. It tackled a lot of things that you wouldn't expect in a kids show. Obviously, for the kids, some of the stories were really funny, and a lot of the jokes, sometimes they would reference something like Pokemon. They would have a parody of that, and they would have their own version of Batman that was a rabbit. But it was arguably the show I watched the most of growing up. And now, from what I understand, the series has wrapped up. Like, they had their
Yeah.
finale episode.
Yep.
So maybe at some point I'll try to find all the episodes that I've missed, because I know they have had a lot more episodes than I remember. And there's a lot of stories that I haven't seen before. So I'd like to see how much the show changed over time and how it really wrapped up. Because from what I understand, the final episode kind of did a "where are they now" type of thing. It's like, these are the characters as adults. This is what they're doing with their life.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can't like actually stream a lot of the episodes, one great kind of alternative is I've listened to a lot of there's a podcast called Elwood City Limits, hosted by two guys from Nova Scotia who pretty much go through the entire series, every episode, scene by scene, and they just
Oh,
recently wrapped up their little commentary on the last pair of episodes ever produced or aired. And so yeah, yeah. If there's an episode you're nostalgic about or curious about or whatever, ever, and you want to hear some other guy's thoughts or whatever on it, yeah, definitely stream Elwood City Limits.
yeah, I'll probably end up checking that out pretty soon then, because I'd love to see other people's thoughts on it. And like you said, I'm nostalgic for certain episodes, so I'd love to hear their take on them for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. A lot of it, because they're Canadian, there's a lot of references to entertainment, like cartoons and stuff that are, I think, unique to Canada. So you may not get the references, but they're they're funny guys enough, so they make
Okay.
up for it in that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll definitely check them out then. Elwood City Limits. I'll have to write that down. And then the other two in this category, we would often watch back to back in the evening after we had dinner, especially because we just loved to try and figure out what the answers were. These were two different game shows, and the first of the two that would air is Wheel of Fortune. It's like I could take or leave watching the wheel spin over and over, but the one thing I loved doing was trying to solve the puzzle before the actual contestants did. Sometimes I would, sometimes I wouldn't, sometimes nobody even would solve it in time, but it was a fun challenge, and especially kind of like a beating the clock type of deal. But just something about figuring out what the puzzle was before all the letters were revealed was very satisfactory.
Oh yeah, sure.
And then the show that would air immediately after that Seth I know is very familiar with is
Yeah.
Jeopardy.
Yes. I in fact kind of tried to apply. I took the test once. I never heard back, so I guess I didn't pass. So
Well, I feel like that's one of those things that could take multiple attempts to get through.
yeah.
So I wouldn't say give up entirely. I'd say try again every once in a while. In the meantime, kind of test yourself on a lot of trivia and see how much you can get.
Yeah.
And then eventually they might get you on the show. Now, as a kid watching the show, there were definitely a lot of moments where I would hear the answer and then they would come up with the question. I'm just thinking, how do these people know these really random things? But at the same time, it really is impressive how much trivia that people know about the world and different parts of it. And as a kid, if I was able to answer it correctly, then I felt a lot smarter. It was like, oh, these are really hard questions, and yet I knew the answer to that one. So, like Wheel of Fortune, it has an element that feels very satisfactory when you can figure it out, especially before the actual contestants.
Sure.
And then the last category, these are all kind of reality shows of sorts, but the last one is more of a contest type of thing, but I'll get to that.
Yeah.
But these next two I did watch a lot, especially with my mom, and the first being Survivor. This is a show I haven't really watched a lot of as of recent. Like there was one particular season that a lot of my family and I were like, okay, this is getting a little ridiculous. Um, so we kind of stopped watching for a little bit, and then we started watching again a couple seasons later. Uh, I haven't watched too much of it, like I said, as of recent, but from what I hear, it's been getting better. So maybe I'll tune back in. But as a kid, I definitely enjoyed watching the show. I loved watching all the challenges and how elaborate some of them were. Obviously, this is one of those shows where I can't solve it before the contestant because you have to actually be there in order to do it. And it's not normally some type of puzzle that the audience can interact with. But I love watching the challenges, and there was some part of me that loved to see the interaction between some of the players because you would have the traditional jerk or the people that were really smart about the show that were being really kind of sneaky about it. There were some characters that people loved, some characters people hated. But overall, it was a fun show, and every once in a while, they would throw in a new gimmick to keep things interesting. And then the other show, this is another case of one airing soon after the other, being The Amazing Race. There were some teams that my mom and I loved, some teams that my mom and I hated, some that we didn't know personally, but maybe some celebrities or people in certain lines of work that we loved watching. And a lot of the different challenges were really interesting to see. Some that my mom and I even expressed interest in trying if we ever got on the show. But I just love the intensity of it all, watching how creative the challenges were. And there was one particular season that my mom and I watched that had a couple of internet parents that were really good at writing funny parodies, and then they ended up winning. It's like, so, especially now that my mom is gone, these two shows hold more of a special place now because not only did I grow up watching them, but I grew up watching them with my mom. So maybe when more seasons come out, I'll watch them to kind of relive my childhood and also in memory of her. And now, the last show that I'll talk about today is one that I still kind of watch because I watched even when I was young. I still watch now. And this is one that a lot of my family love to watch and talk about after each episode. That being America's Got Talent. There's just so much variety on the show, whether it be new judges coming in or the occasional insane act that people come up with, or even taking something that they'd seen before and putting a fresh spin on it. Just the sheer spectacle of the show, some of the drama to some degree, but just seeing all the different varieties of acts that people would have, or particular acts that we were interested in, and seeing people pull it off in such an amazing way. Like, especially after Terry Fader was on there, we loved watching the ventriloquists. A lot of the singers we loved. One of our particular favorites has been Cody Lee, I believe is his name. He is blind, and I believe they said he has autism. And he ended up winning the whole show because he was just so incredible at what he did. You would not be able to tell just by looking at him, but I think that made his gift all the more special. He was a phenomenal singer and could play the piano at the same time, no less. And it was just so different from how he normally acted and sounded that you were just blown away. And it's acts like that that keep me coming back to the show just because of how memorable and impactful they can be. Just seeing these people's life stories on top of it really adds to it. But those are all the ones I have. Maybe I'll think of more if we ever do a part two to this, because this could go on for a while.
Maybe. Yeah. So I've got a bunch, and in a way, more or less like Jordan, I had a fling, for lack of a better term, with TV game shows myself, and a particular one among them was Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which for its time was a pretty groundbreaking, revolutionary. They kind of repopularized the primetime game show format, and it it was one of those shows you never knew how far somebody was going to go. Well, the trivia, of course, got harder as it went, and frequently they would have like celebrities on there playing for charity, like Lance Bass and Marion Ross, who was most famous for Happy Days, but also did the voice for SpongeBob's grandma, by the way.
Oh,
Yeah, and John Favreau one time was on. This was before, I think, even Elf, let alone the MCU thing, got started. But I think
Sure.
not sure what he was mostly known for, like comedy or something. But yeah,
Honestly, I'm not sure.
yeah, yeah. So that was one, and then Hollywood Squares, which was more particularly celebrity centric, and they had let's again, this was the specifically the syndicated incarnation where they had like stars like Gilbert Gottfried, who voiced Iago in Aladdin, and a lot of people probably primarily known for comedic stuff, and of course they just like had their silly one-liners, which were probably written by writers, but nonetheless people laughed at, and
I feel like I've heard of Hollywood Squares, but oddly enough, I don't know if I've ever actually seen it.
yeah, yeah. It's basically a tic-tac-toe with celebrities in each little grid. So
Oh, by
yeah,
describing it, it does sound kind of familiar.
yeah,
I'll have to check it out if I can.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I also had a fling, for lack of a better word, with Wheel and with Jeopardy myself. I would religiously watch that like
Yep.
every evening I could, every weeknight for a long time. Uh, and even after I stopped doing that regularly, I would still maybe watch it every once in a long while, but yeah, not as much anymore. But
Sure.
and then there was Fear Factor, which was another reality game show on NBC, hosted by Joe Rogan, who is probably better known like for like podcasting and doing MMA commentary. But before before I think all that really came about, he hosted this show Fear Factor, where people would do like these crazy physical stunts and eat things like bugs and stuff.
Yeah, that was one show I could sometimes get into, but it really depended on what the challenges were. Like some of them I could stomach. Like there was a guy who had to be strapped to a wheel while his head was inside a box with scorpions.
Ugh,
Um, but it was more the stuff that was just intentionally gross that I couldn't really sit with. I don't remember too many examples, but there was one where somebody had to get something in their mouth and spit it through a tube into someone else's mouth, and it was like,
uh,
okay, this is just nasty.
oh, man, like mono people, please, yeah, that's yeah, and then then I also had quite a you know a good long time with Arthur. Even collected a few of the cassettes, and I definitely it definitely had this. I guess the word I'm looking for is longevity because it tackled themes that were relevant to so many different kinds of people,
Sure.
and you know, I feel like even after a few seasons, I feel like they run out of original that even if they're trying.
Mhm.
I kind of got after a while. Still, nonetheless, nice to see how it has resonated with so many, and yeah,
Yeah, there were definitely some recurring themes or episodes that were redone. Um, Although sometimes it was understandable. Like I know they had this whole episode where Binky was looking up to Lance Armstrong, and then when it was revealed in real life what Lance Armstrong was doing and
yeah,
how he got his wins,
yeah,
they redid that whole episode with an entirely original character.
yeah. Yeah. Well, then there was also this is something honestly, I know you said you didn't watch these. I think you said, but you know, if it makes you feel better, I don't really hear it being talked about as often anymore by my peers, honestly, and that is the Spy Kids franchise.
Yeah, I do I can say rather that I have not seen them, but I do remember when Spy Kids 3 was coming out. I remember I really wanted to see it. Never actually did, but at least the third one I really wanted to see. Maybe at some point I'll come back and watch these three movies because there was a part of me as a kid that wanted to, and I'm still kind of intrigued as to how they play out.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say though, yeah, I'm not sure why these movies really stuck with me. I guess it had a lot to do with like I was really hooked on like computers and and electronic gadgetry, electronic toys, and there are so many of them in these movies that the kids like do their stuff with,
Mhm.
and yeah, and yeah, I feel like there's just so much inventiveness and creativity, and even if it borrows heavily from a lot of stuff, it's done in a way that doesn't feel too derivative, and it's very know, high energy, high fun, well acted, well production designed, and all that.
Yeah, I might actually end up seeing them at some point then, because I did grow up watching one of Rodriguez's other films, Shark Boy and Lava Girl, which I feel like was done in a very similar style, at least to some degree. So I feel like if I can watch that movie and enjoy it, then in theory I could enjoy these movies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What's even cooler is that one of the Spy Kids, Alexa Penavega, as she goes by now, who starred as the Agent Carmen, is now a very outspoken Christian woman, and is
Okay.
talked in I've watched and listened to several interviews that she's done in more recent years about, uh, how she lives out her faith, how she kind of approaches, spreading and sharing it. It's just real fascinating to see and hear, how how important her faith is to her, and how she expresses it, and how just intellectually sharp she is as a person and stuff. It's so and how gracious she is. It's it's really it just makes me even like her even more than I did when I was a kid watching Spy Kids.
There's always something admirable about people like her that aren't afraid to express their faith in a public setting, because there's a lot of people who are very tentative about that because they figure, and a lot of times they're right, they'll face some backlash or some controversy because of it. But those who are willing to go out of their way to say, hey, this is what I believe in, this is how I live my life in a setting like that is very bold, and I respect them for that.
And if like even if they do it right, I feel like they still do get some black backlash. In some cases, they do get blacklisted. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's really exactly happened to her, but I feel like even if it did, I feel like she would stick to her guns either way.
Well, I can say that I haven't really heard much of her in recent years. I don't know if it's a blacklisting thing. I think it's just because there's a lot of stuff that I've watched that she just happened to not be in, and even if she was, I may have not noticed.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's okay.
Yeah.
Um, and then I don't know if you ever watched like the Inspector Gadget movies that Disney made. Those were a pretty big part of my childhood. Maybe a couple times or so I watched the first one, and then maybe even more the direct-to-video sequel. Yeah, but probably for similar reasons. Yeah. So did you ever see like those Inspector Gadget movies that Disney made?
I'm I'm assuming you're talking about the live action ones
Yeah.
with
Yes.
Broderick.
Yes.
Okay. I know I'd seen the first one a handful of times, and I remember seeing advertisements for the second one, but I don't remember if I ever saw that one.
Yeah. Yeah. But the first one though.
I definitely did see the first one.
Yeah. Oh yeah, so I think I was into it maybe for similar reasons to Spy Kids, high energy, good technology stuff, and I'm taking just watching this guy use all these different machines to just like do things easily and fight the bad guys. I don't know. I guess it was just the kind of thing. I guess just right for a kid. I guess.
Yeah, I would say a lot of stories that people like us grew up with definitely had a hero versus villain story arc to it. And this was kind of a unique way to approach it because there weren't too many characters that had the abilities that Inspector Gadget has.
Yeah, and then let's say also two other Disney films that I liked, and probably my favorite Christmas film ever, The Santa Claus, starring Tim Allen,
Mhm.
where Tim Allen, finds Santa Claus on the roof and ends up replacing him. And it's a good story. It brought like a realistic like broken family plot line, married that with like traditional tropes, whatever of Christmas North Pole fantasy in it. Well, I'll take well scored, well production design, and the second one especially, only very good visual effects and very well done production design, and another good story about in that one about Tim Allen having to find a Mrs. Claus. Yeah, so yeah, definitely feel good Disney Christmas stuff. If you're looking for something maybe a little different, you might like that.
Now, did you see the Disney Plus series? I think it was that
I did,
kind of
yes.
followed up on it.
Yeah, I did.
What do you think of it?
I don't know. I felt like it had some highlights. I would say like Peyton Manning making a cameo in one episode. I'll say
Okay.
that. Yeah, I mean, it was good. Nice to see like how they brought back some of the characters, like the head elf and like the son. I don't, I don't know. Felt like it maybe was a little too slow for me.
Okay. I can definitely understand that. Uh, what's really interesting is that up until recently, I had never seen any of the Santa Claus movies, but this past Christmas, I finally saw the first one
Oh,
and I absolutely enjoyed it. So now, especially when Christmas rolls back around, I'll be really excited to see the other two.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And then one I'm sure, or many people of our generation uh, really loved a lot, and pretty much do too. Toy Story.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What's been said that hasn't been said already, but I guess I'll try. Just no. Well, a great way they humanize these toy characters and exciting adventure that they found themselves into, and yeah, yeah. Just what can I say? It's just like simple genius.
It really is. And I don't know about you, but I was one of the many kids after the first movie, especially after the second one, because I don't think I was around when the first one was released. Um, but I was one of the kids that would sometimes leave my room and then quickly come back in to see it if any of the toys were actually moving.
I don't know. I never did that. I can't say I did that, but I can understand if a lot of kids did that though.
Oh yeah, and I loved Buzz Lightyear growing up and just seeing him in the first two and eventually the third movie. Like I just love watching it. Buzz Lightyear Star Command was also a fun film to watch. I never did see the show. In any case, uh, yeah, the first Toy Story especially was very revolutionary for the time.
Yeah.
Uh, Told a great story, like you were saying. And it really had us sympathizing with what's normally inanimate objects.
Yeah.
And it approached things in a really smart way that people started to pick up on after the third movie came out,
Yeah.
where the movies were kind of growing up with the kids who were watching it. Because by the time the third movie came out, a lot of those kids that grew up on the first two movies were going off to college or were already in college. So the situation that Andy was in, they could still relate to even all those years later.
Yeah. I was uh, yeah, think depending on when the third came out, I was pretty late into high school. So yeah, I had and I was like maybe uh a couple years old at the time of the first one. So yeah, I'd certainly, like so many, grown up with the series, and yeah, yeah, and so yeah, it was naturally, I guess, just a big part of me.
Yeah, now I'm really intrigued, for the lack of a better word, to see how this upcoming fifth movie does, because I have no idea what they're gonna talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. Then there was a film that I didn't probably didn't see as often, maybe a couple, two, three times, but still have only positive memories about Babe, about about a farm pig, and the part of the pig was actually voiced by the OG voice actress for Chucky on Rugrats, Christine Cavanaugh.
Hmm.
So yeah, yeah, and yeah, there was some they had like a human voice actor for like every animal on the farm, and had had a very like episodic story structure to it, and a couple of and a couple or so of funny physical gags in it. Yeah, and yeah, I can't say I've retained much memory of it, but I do remember, remember liking it enough.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever did see Babe in the end. I know I've seen it around, like images or different clips and whatnot, but I don't know if I ever ended up seeing the whole thing. I definitely read and watched Charlotte's Web, which also featured a talking pig,
Yeah.
but I don't know if I ever saw Babe.
Oh yeah, did you see the uh animated or live action or both of Charlotte's Web?
I definitely did see the animated one a few times. I want to say I saw the live action one once, maybe twice, but I feel like more often than not, I tuned into the animated one.
Yeah, sure. Sure, yeah. And then and though we didn't technically have cable ourselves, we would get like, well, we'd get quite a bit of like Nickelodeon and stuff recorded off of TV from like my grandma or something. And mm, one a pretty frequent thing I would be exposed to from Nickelodeon was, well, Rugrats, which in a way, like Arthur, depicted several situations relatable to kids in a way that was creatively told from the perspective of a young child, and with humor, and in such a way that it made the stakes feel higher than they would look to anybody older.
I like you. I didn't have Nickelodeon growing up, but we definitely had at least a couple VHS tapes. I'm pretty sure. And one episode I remember watching a lot was I think they were messing with a mirror, and they eventually believed they were in some sort of mirror land, or like everything was reversed or something like that. And then I think it was Chucky who had some type of clown punching bag thing, a clown airbag, something like that. But there were definitely a handful of episodes I remember watching. I don't remember too much about them, but to some degree, I did grow up on Rugrats too.
Yeah. And perhaps even more SpongeBob.
Yeah, SpongeBob was another one that obviously I didn't have access to directly, but we did have a couple of VHS tapes that had some random episodes on there. And oftentimes when I visit a friend's house growing up, one of the shows we would watch is SpongeBob.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a show like I have friends like in within and outside of Artists Unlimited who like can remember a scene in detail, like the quotes, like the
Mhm.
dialogue. Uh, and I can follow up almost immediately with the next line. And it's gold when that happens.
Oh yeah, a lot of people, especially the first 3 seasons, they will know a lot of the scenes or quotes like the back of their hand.
Yeah.
Like you just start a scene and anyone that loves SpongeBob that hears it will just instantly turn around and join in on it. Like if I were just to randomly say, just look at him, square, the following line would be,
Ooh. I should know this, shouldn't I? I really maybe that's one episode I didn't see.
well, this was the Fry Cook Games where
Uh,
Plankton and Mr. Krabs were motivating SpongeBob and Patrick respectfully. And Patrick was like, he wouldn't. Of course he would. Just look at him. Square. The shape of evil.
oh man, I know I've seen that one, man. That's just a like if you said maybe yellow, I could have said pink.
Yeah.
but but
Or
but
another,
yeah, not it's just yeah, it's just it just happened to fall not my way this time.
and that's perfectly fine. I mean, there's a lot that you can reference or quote. And I won't go too much further into that because we could be here a while just quoting SpongeBob. But one that I've been quoting a lot recently, especially with other people, is from the episode where SpongeBob and Patrick are on the run because they think they committed a crime after swiping a balloon. And when Patrick immediately eats his candy bar and then thinks SpongeBob took it, he's just like, you took my only food. Now I'm gonna starve. And it just pans down to show that he's got a lot of food in his stomach.
Right. Yeah. And taken then, as Jordan kind of briefly referred to, there was the ABC Saturday morning blocks,
Mhm.
which there was one Saturday morning, and then it was rebranded as ABC Kids, and quite a handful of nostalgic cartoons and shows on there, like Recess, which was kind of
Mhm.
kids' version of like the Prisoner of War film formula, and then there was Doug, Pepper Ann, uh, Lizzie McGuire, Even Stevens, Kim Possible, of course, and even um, a series of Power Rangers, which I also saw a little bit of,
That is
uh,
true.
and and yeah, and so it was a good way. So it was my introduction to stuff like the live action stuff of Even Stevens and Lizzie McGuire. That was stuff that was technically Disney Channel, but it also got some airtime on ABC on Saturday mornings. So I got well, a little more exposure to that as a result, and and I since rewatched a bit of both of those shows on Disney Plus, and now apparently Disney Channel has the first Even Stevens episode on YouTube, and I've replayed it, and it is one of the best written things I've ever watched.
Yeah, I know every once in a while we've brought up Even Stevens on this show, and maybe at some point, especially now that that first episode is on YouTube, I'll look at that and see if that grabs me to the point where I want to watch the rest of the series. Because I've heard some good things about it, and maybe I just need to see an episode to really understand it.
Yeah, Oh yeah, it is a bit unrealistic. I'll admit it is a bit absurdist comedy, but in a way that's definitely entertaining though.
Sure. And I feel like the entertainment factor is the most important thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I feel like that's all we've got to say this time. But thanks everyone for streaming this, and check out all of our episodes on Spotify and YouTube. Keep up with my posts on it on Seth underscore Mariano underscore AU on Instagram. And questions and comments are very much appreciated.
Yeah, and let us know, what movies and shows did you grow up with? Which ones had an impact on your life, whether it be good or maybe possibly not so good? Um, for any shows that have been revived, rebooted, or what have you, which ones did you think did well? Which ones do you think did not do so well? If you want to see a part two of this, or if you want us to go into more detail on some of the ones that we briefly talked about, please let us know.
Yeah, well, thanks everyone, and until next time, see you.
So long.